everybody, today we're here to know a little bit more about ACE and see how it can help me keep track of my application running on AWS. And before we jump into ACE, I think it's worth showing the application itself so we know what we're dealing with. So it's a pretty simple tasks application, so I can add new tasks and I can mark them as done, or I can delete a task. So it's a very handy little application, and this application is running on EKS. As you guys can see here, I have two clusters. One is the development cluster, and the other one is the actual production cluster. One of its core functionalities that you'll come across as you start using it is its ability to map your AWS environment and find all the resources that are supporting your main application. Here, I've already asked ACE to run a full discovery process on my AWS account, more precisely on the region US West 1, that is where my application is running. So now we can ask ACE to show us the documentation that you created. As you can see, ACE gathered all the information you could find about all the resources behind our application, and is a pretty complete list. And now we're pretty much free to ask ACE anything we want to know about all these resources, even status-related information. And in this case, ACE actually runs commands to gather the latest reports on all this status. This way, we're always up to date with our application. Pretty cool. Now that we are set and ready to go, let's start playing around with ACE a little bit, shall we? And as you can see here, ACE found all of my environments, and I want to know a little bit more about my production cluster. So let's get the name of the cluster, and let's ask ACE to tell us more about this cluster. Now, I think it's a good point to mention something that I think it's really important to be said. That is the fact that ACE is always committed to being as transparent as possible. So here you can always check on the replies to see everything that is happening behind the scenes, see what ACE is doing, what reasoning is following. And this is especially important for developers, so you can keep track of what is happening. And as a developer myself, I really appreciate this feature. But now back to our cluster here. As you can see, ACE returned all the information relevant to that cluster in specific. And this here is our information that was already in the documentation. The reason why we're not seeing it up here is because this is a condensed version of the documentation. And the reason why ACE does this is because otherwise this message here will be enormous. And in my case here, Slack wouldn't be able to handle such a message. So ACE first shows you an overview of the entire documentation. And as you ask for more specific question, ACE then starts to show you specific sections of the documentation. And this is pretty much what happened here. And about the information itself, everything here checks, and ACE returned everything that is important about this cluster. We can go even further and ask for even more specific information, but this here is really impressive. Going down the rabbit hole, so to speak, this time around, let's go one layer deeper and let's ask ACE about even more application, this time about our nodes, more specifically the nodes that are running our actual application. Checking on the message here, we can see that because I didn't specify clusters or environments or anything, ACE just went ahead and scanned both environments, production and development, and it returned information on the nodes that were actually running my application. And all the information here is of really good quality, and ACE is quite proactive too. And he also returned some key observations here. They are pretty much like an overall report, and yeah, pretty cool things. And ACE is truly an all-around DevOps assistant, so it's not limited to just scanning your AWS account and returning what you can see. ACE is actually very smart and very capable, and it can do many things for you, like creating files and modifying files. It can do research for you. It can interact with GitHub repositories, do pull requests. It can create Terraform templates, really, you name it. So I want to do a little experiment here with you guys. So you can see that at the end of the message here, ACE asked me if I would like to elaborate or anything more specific. And I saw that here on the key observations, ACE actually mentioned that both of my clusters are running on Spot instance. So let's say that you want to know a little bit more about what a Spot instance actually is. So let's ask ACE. And just like that, ACE returned a pretty straight to the point answer to my question. That is exactly what I was looking for. And This is truly amazing because it means that you can do many things without having to leave the same environment. And that translates into more productivity and more comfort for you as the final user. Now, following the thread of creating resources, why don't I ask Ace to set up an alarm that will send us an email every single time our memory utilization goes above a certain threshold? Sounds pretty cool, so let's do it. Let's put a fairly low threshold here just so we can see the email being actually sent. So Ace returned its response to my request, and as you can see here, some things were done successfully, others not so much, but being proactive as Ace is, it's actually telling me here the things that I should consider, and it's telling me that 6 megabyte seems extremely low and that typically memory alarms are set in percentage, and also it's telling me here to verify or specify instance IDs instead of just using a broad term as the nodes running my application. So I'll make the modifications here and let's see how Ace will handle the request. So I grabbed my instance ID and I'm also telling Ace to change the threshold to percentage. It's still extremely low, but that's exactly what I want. So let's proceed this way. And Ace also told me that I need to subscribe to the alarm. So I'm also going to do that. Right, everybody, so while Ace was running its commands, I subscribed to the alarm, and now we can see here a summary of everything that happened, and right up top we can see that Ace successfully created the alarm, what is really good, and down here we can see some reports. So we can check here that Ace, again, being super proactive, filled up some empty spaces as I didn't specify things like evaluation periods. So Ace defined a evaluation period on its own. And down here, we can see that the current state is insufficient data. And that's because this alarm has just been created. So the metric hasn't been evaluated enough times to have any significant data, but this will change really soon. Ace is actually telling us exactly that right here. And we also have some recommendations here, but now let's play around with the application a little bit to see if we can trigger this alarm. Let's ask it about all the user groups that we have in our account. And for nobody's surprise, Ace returned all the user groups in the account and again even returned extra information saying that we have a total of 6 IAM user groups in this region and each group has a unique ID, and it's also telling us the creation span of these groups, and it's again asking us if we would like to check on any extra information. Now, following on the thread of files creation, let's see how Ace handles infrastructure as code. So let's ask Ace to create a couple of CloudFormation templates and store them on an S3 bucket and also run them automatically. So let's go. Ace has just finished processing my command, and as you can see here, it created a bucket and it also created the CloudFormation template, and it's saying here it created a bucket with a unique name, and I checked on the replies and I saw that there was already a bucket with that name, so Ace went ahead and created a bucket with a unique name to avoid any conflict. So again, Ace being super proactive and solving problems on its own. So it's saying that now the template is on the bucket. So let's ask Ace to also run the template. Checking out our AWS account, we can see that the bucket was indeed created and so was the template. You can also check on the content of the template, but it's a pretty simple template. And now looking at CloudFormation, we can see that the stack was successfully deployed and our instance is running successfully too. Let's now see how Ace deals with potentially harmful changes to our application that can implicate on how it works. Can Ace identify these changes and restore the resources back to their known work states? Let's check this out. So here for this test, I made a little modification to the application that definitely broke the website. So can Ace identify which resource I changed? Let's see, and I won't say which resource I modify, so you guys will discover with me and Ace. Let's first describe what's happening. So let's describe the symptoms. So in our case, we're getting a server not found error, and then let's see what ACE can do with this information. As you can see, ACE returned me its best guesses, and a lot of them are related to connectivity, so it's definitely in the right track. But the first hint that we gave ACE was quite vague, so let's see if we can elaborate a little bit more on our hint and feed ACE with some more information. So let's come back here to the browser and let's bring the inspector. Let's come here to the network tab, and now let's reload the page. And here we can see that the browser is giving us NS error, connection refused. So let's tell ACE that this is the specific error that we're getting. So with that extra information, ACE did a more narrowed down search into our infrastructure, particularly looking into my load balancer and listeners and target groups, what is probably a good guess, as these are typically the most common places where connectivity issues tend to lie. So this here is pretty good, and lo and behold, ACE found something pretty interesting here that he even highlighted as unusual. So as you can see, it's saying that the port for our HTTPS connection is port 120? This is wrong. It should be 443. Otherwise, your server is unreachable, so your connection will be refused. That is exactly the error that we got. So I'm pretty sure that this is our problem. So let's ask ACE to fix it. So ACE completed the fix. So now let's check if our website is working again. And just like that, our website is up and running again. Really, really good. But so far we've been using ACE pretty much unrestrictedly. What isn't advisable? Ideally, you want to have a way of controlling who can do what on your account. And here's where I present to you our second player in the game, AceSec. And with AceSec, we can pretty much place policies over users and resources, so you can really fine-grain who can do what to what. And having this level of control is extremely important to keep the security and the stability of our cloud environments. And now I have the assistance of my comrade Archer to help me demonstrate to you how you can use AceSec to create some basic policies and how you can fine-grain these policies, because sometimes we have one user and we want to restrict its access to one specific function in one specific scenario, but we still want this user to have access to this function in a different scenario. And well, you can do this no problems with AceSec. As you can see here, Archer has pretty much unlimited access to ACE, and that's because he has a full access permission attached to his user. So he can really do whatever he wants. So he can, for example, list our pods and check on all the information about all of our pods across all environments. And here, this poses no risk, but in a real scenario, you want to limit who can see critical information about your application. So let's get started by placing some policies here that will restrict his access to all Kubernetes related information. Here you can see that ACE returned all the information that Archer asked about our pods, so let's change this. So let's create a policy here that will restrict his ability to view all information related to Kubernetes. So AceSec has just finished updating the security policies, and now Archer no longer has access to anything related to Kubernetes, and AceSec is actually listing here some of the items that Archer will no longer have access to, such as configurations, deployments, service, pretty much everything really, and that's exactly what I wanted. Now let's put our policy to test and let's ask Archer to repeat the command to see what's gonna happen and how AceDev will behave. And just like that, we can see that AceDev returned that Archer's request was blocked by Ace Security due to security policy violations. Another thing that we can also do with AceSec is creating fine-grained policies. And what that means is that we can create a policy that restricts a certain user access to one specific thing in one specific situation, but not in others. So in my case here, I want to protect all of our EC2 instances that are related to our production cluster from being deleted. But I still want Archer to have the capacity of deleting EC2 instance, because let's say that maybe he's also assigned to another project that requires him to delete EC2 instance. In this case, having the capacity of creating fine-grained policies is extremely important. So let's place this policy now and let's see what's going to happen when Archer tries to delete an instance that is related to our production cluster. And as expected, ASEC blocked the request, and it's even specifying here that if this instance is not part of the production cluster, then please specify in your request, because otherwise you are allowed to perform the deletion. Another usage of ASEC is reinforcing good practices. So here you can see that Archer can just freely create resources directly into the account, and that's not really good. So how can ASEC help us here? Well, one option that we have here to reinforce the usage of infrastructure as code is first blocking Archer from directly creating resources into the account, and then telling him to ask for a CloudFormation template instead to provision the said resource. So once more, let's place this policy and let's check what's gonna happen. Policy was created successfully, so now let's ask Archer to try and create another resource again. This time around, Archer tried to create an RGS database, and as you can see, his request was once again blocked by ACE security, so Archer can no longer create a resource directly into the account. Instead, ACE is telling him that he should request a CloudFormation template to provision the resources, and that's exactly what we wanted. Well, we've been using ASEC this whole time, and we've been creating policies, but let's say that it's been a couple of days, and you didn't keep track of all the policies you were creating, or maybe you're new to the project, so what you, the person in charge, or even Archer himself, wants to know what policies are taking place on your account. Well, we can ask ASEC exactly that. So let's now see which policies are taking place on Archer's account. And very quickly, ASEC returned a list with all the policies that we have in place for Archer, and he's also describing all the policies so we know what they do. And look at how interesting here at the bottom, ASEC is specifying that these policies are frameworks. So Archer technically still has general access, but with some restrictions. Very, very cool. Now, last but definitely not least, it's time for us to talk about EZOps. And EZOps is pretty much a always watchful and always vigilant operations assistant that is here to make sure everything on your infrastructure is running on tracks. The way we work with EZOps is by creating monitoring policies, and this policy will create then scans that will be ran in intervals that you define, or alarms that will be triggered every single time a certain threshold is reached. For the scans, they will always generate reports that will be displayed on the chat every single time a scan is executed, and for the alarms, obviously you will receive a message when the threshold is reached. And even though all of this sounds pretty cool, setting up alarms has never been this easy. One of EZOps features that I probably like the most is its capacity to not only monitor your resources, but to also fix problems on its own. Yes, you heard me right. If during these scans EZOps identifies that anything went off rails, it will attempt to fix the problem on its own, and it will notify you about it in the next report. And if for some reason EZOps can't fix the problem, then it will also notify you about it, and it will guide you through the steps to debug the problem even further. Here, I want to show you this in action. So I want to place down a monitoring policy that will check if all my pods on my production cluster are running on a healthy state, and if they are, then I want EZOps to send me an OK message, and if they're not, then I want EZOps to attempt to fix the problem and also notify me here in the chat. So let's type this policy here real quick. Once a policy is created, EZOps will always give you a message telling you that the policy was created successfully, and in this message you can also see a summary of the policy and also of the task that will be created based on the policy. The result of the first scan has returned, and to make this scan more efficient, what I did on the prompt was specify to EZOps to focus its search on the namespace ACE test. So here in this report, we can see that both pods that are running in this namespace are healthy and on running state. So now what I want to do is purposefully crash one of these pods to see if EZOps will identify the problem and fix it correctly. As you can see here, I've intentionally made one of my pods go into crash loop back off state. And just like that, we can see here that an issue was detected and a pod was in crash loop back off state, failing with exit code 1. And that's exactly what I did. I messed up with the container. And the remediation action that was taken was to roll back the deployment to the previous stable version, and now all pods are running healthily again. So as you can see, EZOps not only can monitor your infrastructure, but it can also fix problems on its own, saving you precious time. A couple of things that I think are worth mentioning are, first of all, you can always list all the policies that are currently running in your project. EZOps will return a list of all the policies that are taking place right now and their descriptions. So this is really good because we all know how easy it is to lose track of these kind of things. And the second thing is that ASEC is always working behind the scenes, so you can obviously control who can place policies on your infrastructure or not.